The Sacramento Kings fall to the defending champion Oklahoma City Thunder 107-101 in a game that had a very disappointing end. It wasn't a game that I expected the Kings to really be in, yet they were, and they were ahead for a lot of the game, and that made what happened in the end even more painful. Why couldn't the Kings just get blown out in this game? Like, obviously, you want to see a good effort, but just having the lead for most of the game, having a nice little 7-point lead, with just a few minutes left and then choking it all away. It really does hurt. Russell Westbrook, in his return to Oklahoma City Thunder, entered the starting lineup, the Kings' fourth game of the season, and the Kings' fourth different starting lineup. And it was poetic that Westbrook was entering the starting lineup back in Oklahoma City, and he was carrying the team in the first quarter. And while it wasn't necessarily super surprising to see Russell Westbrook enter the starting lineup because he had been closing games with this lineup, it still was kind of wild just to see the lineup that the Kings were putting on the floor with four guards, Russell Westbrook playing the four position pretty much, with Sabonis out there as the only big guy. And yet, the Kings actually held up defensively. The Oklahoma City Thunder, they moved to 5-0. They came into this game undefeated. And so while it wasn't a game that I expected the Kings to win, it was an opportunity with the Thunder missing some guys, missing Jalen Williams, missing Chet Holmgren, missing a few other guys, also on the second night of a back-to-back. And so while it wasn't a game that I expected the Kings to win, you can be proud of the effort that the Kings gave. It still was disappointing to have that lead and then see it dissipate late in the fourth quarter. There were definitely some interesting things in this game that I think the Kings could kind of build on going forward, especially with this Russell Westbrook in the starting lineup at the 4. The Thunder are not exactly the biggest team, especially with the injuries that they have, so I don't know how this is going to go against certain other teams. Against the Thunder, maybe it could work a little better, especially with what we saw with the Kings throwing out a little 2-3 zone. I'm sure that's something that we'll see going forward. There were a few solid individual performances from this game, and as a team defensively, they looked fairly connected for most of the game, which was nice to see. It was one of the Kings, maybe the Kings' best performance of the season, early in this season. But there are also definitely still some question marks from this game. Like, is this starting lineup sustainable? How is it going to act down the stretch going forward? Because in this game, the Kings offense went completely cold and didn't really look like they knew what they were doing. So definitely some positives to take away from this game, but also a lot of questions still up in the air with the fourth starting lineup in 4 different games, and the Kings still really having no idea what the rotation is at this point. But we can quickly go through the game flow. To start out, the Kings looked a little bit rough, especially with turnovers. I think Levine had like 4 turnovers in the first quarter alone. He was trying to feed Sabonis inside time after time, and he was just throwing it at Sabonis's feet. It was a rough start. Turnovers for the Kings it's been a problem to start games this season so far. And there were also some lapses defensively in transition, but then it was Russell Westbrook to save the day, catching fire from 3, going 3 for 3 from 3 to start this game out. Levine also hit one. The Kings started 4 for 6 from 3. And that's been one of the Kings' strengths so far this season, is the three-point shooting. As much as they aren't a huge volume three-point shooting team, they have been pretty good in terms of percentage. The Kings' shot distribution as a whole is an anomaly throughout the league because they have so much in the mid-range. A lot of that down to DeMar DeRozan, but other guys as well. They don't get to the rim as much. They don't shoot as many threes as other teams. And while that can be a problem, it is nice to see the Kings shooting well from 3 to start this season. They didn't necessarily continue as strong from 3 as the game went on. They went 6 for 23 after they started 4 for 6, but it was still a very nice start. When Russell Westbrook can hit threes, he is unstoppable. But it wasn't just the threes. He also built off that, offensively getting into the paint, creating for others, which was nice to see. The Kings didn't get too many stops early on, and so they went to a zone. Even when SGA wasn't on the floor, they went to a 2-3 zone. I didn't think it started out all that great. A couple of guard-to-guard screens at the elbow opened up open three-point shooters pretty easily. AJ Mitchell was getting some open shots. We did see Devin Carter get minutes in that first quarter, which was interesting. I'll definitely talk more about him later. But the Kings ended the quarter really strong, a 9-0 run, sparked mostly by DeMar DeRozan getting into his bag in the mid-range, and the Kings were able to end that first quarter up 29-24 To start the second quarter, it was more of the same from DeMar DeRozan, mid-post scoring, and he just started attracting so much attention from the OKC defense, and that opened up his passing game. He was playmaking from that mid-post area, and I thought the Kings' ball movement was very good. They had Russell Westbrook, Malik Monk, Devin Carter, and DeMar DeRozan all out there together, and Eubanks was out there as well, and that unit actually played really well. We got some great Drew Eubanks minutes in the second quarter, which was interesting. It was interesting to see him even get into this game when I thought maybe we would see more Dylan Cardwell. It looks like that backup center position is still very much up for grabs, but I thought Eubanks was a force on the offensive glass and as a rim deterrent on defense. But that unit played really well because DeMar, like I said, scoring and playmaking out of the mid post. Westbrook, Monk, and Devin Carter all passing and driving off of DeMar really, really well. Russell Westbrook and Malik Monk both getting to the rim. Monk had a beautiful Euro step at one point, and they were just moving the ball really well. The Kings' zone defense had more success in that second quarter than it did in the first, and a lot of it felt like was to take away Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and really take away the Thunder's ability to get to the rim as much. The Kings absolutely conceded some open shots in their zone, but they were just trying to take away Shai. The Kings were pretty much saying, anybody but Shai, sure, you're going to generate some open threes for an Alex Caruso, maybe a Kaysen Wallace, guys like that, but we can live with those. Jalen Williams, Jay Will, is going to get some open threes. We can live with that. If he's going to make three-point shots, then, I mean, that's just what we're going to live with, right? We would rather that than Shai cooking us all game, going one-on-one, getting to the rim, and having what happened against the Lakers with Austin Reeves, where he gets to the line a million times, happen with Shai because we know how SGA can get to the line. The Thunder only had 4 free throws in the entire first half, and they only ended with 10 free throw attempts on the game. So the Kings did very well in that zone defense to take away the Thunder ability to get to the paint and then get to the free throw line. The Kings went up 10, but then the Thunder did respond with a run. I thought it was sparked by Alex Caruso's aggressiveness offensively. And then it was also sparked by OKC getting onto the offensive glass, because that can be a weakness both with the Kings as a whole, playing some 4-guard lineups with Sabonis being really the only rebounder, but also playing in a zone, it can be hard to rebound. So the Thunder were taking advantage of that. Shai finally started getting to the rim a little bit, but Zach LaVine countered with some great shot making to keep OKC at bay a little bit, and DeMar was able to end the half with a big bucket to keep the Kings up 4. In that third quarter, I think the Kings missed quite a few good opportunities. They missed a lot of pretty easy shots. Sabonis in this game was just missing a ton at the rim. He had a pretty poor game. He did have some nice offensive rebounds though, but the Kings were unable to convert. They just missed a lot of really good opportunities, some of them in transition, right at the rim, open threes, second chance points that they didn't convert. And OKC came down, hit a couple of transition threes, and were able to cut it to 1. And eventually a few more blown opportunities for the Kings, and OKC actually took the lead in this game by 1 point. But I loved how the Kings responded. And a lot of it was through Keon Ellis. Keon came into the game, and he was amazing, especially guarding Shai one-on-one. The Kings were going in and out of man-to-man defense versus zone defense. But either way, Keon was getting matched up on Shai quite a bit, and he was doing a very good job. We know how Keon has struggled with foul trouble, and he struggled guarding and staying in front of Shai in the past. Keon's biggest strength has never been his one-on-one defense, but he was very good, especially in the third quarter, with his one-on-one defense. Stripping Shai in the post one time, just being able to stay in front and contesting shots really well, not just against Shai, but also his closeouts were so good on three-point shooters. With the Kings in this zone, there were a lot of long closeouts, especially on the wings, and Keon was great at contesting those shots. And so the Kings were able to counter OKC going up 1 with an 11-0 run on their own, getting stops, a lot of them through Keon's great defense. Finally, Sabonis making a layup, Keon hitting a 3, spacing the floor really well. And so the Kings went up 10. And then they went to a lineup of Russell Westbrook, Malik Monk, Keon Ellis, DeMar DeRozan, Drew Eubanks. A lineup that had been pretty good in the first half. It wasn't the exact same lineup because Devin Carter wasn't in there at that point. But a similar lineup to the first half unit that played really well. That unit was awful. They absolutely killed the Kings offense. Complete stagnation. Your turn, my turn. That was a point in the game where the offense was so frustrating because it was just DeMar DeRozan's ISOing. And then the next possession, everyone's standing around and watching Russ ISO. And then it's Monk's turn. There just wasn't spacing. There was no movement. The ball was not moving well. Malik Monk really started struggling towards the end of the third and start of the fourth quarters, being guarded by Alex Caruso and other really good OKC defenders. He was turning the ball over. He couldn't really get anything going offensively. And I also thought his effort really took a lapse defensively. There were times he was just walking around the court on the defensive end, which is not a great look. And so the Kings had a chance to extend the lead. They had some open shots. Keon Ellis had an open three that would have really pushed the lead, I think, to 12. And instead that he missed that three, just like in the Lakers game where the Kings had some opportunities, and it was Keon again missing some open threes, which is, unfortunate. Not necessarily on Keon. It's just like he happened to be the guy taking shots in these kind of timely moments where the momentum shifted. And the momentum shifted big time. OKC went on a big run because the Kings offense completely stagnated. Luckily, Westbrook was able to stem the tide a little bit with a big steal. And DeMar was able to get to the free throw line towards the end of that third quarter to keep the Kings in the lead. But it was not a good end of the third quarter. To start the fourth, DeMar and Russ stepped up offensively to keep the Kings in the lead. And then Zach LaVine came into the game, and he came through big, was able to get a steal and finish on the other end, was then able to hit a three, and the Kings went up 7. Zach LaVine was good scoring the ball in this game, shot the ball really well. I wish he had shot more at times. There were a few times where the Kings, or at least one time in this game, where the Kings really started to go to the Sabonis-LaVine dribble handoff, and LaVine came around and immediately, no hesitation, got up into a three-point shot and got fouled. He didn't even make it, but that's what happens because defenses have to respect his three-point shot. And so when he's shooting, it forces them into tough spots. They have to foul him. So I would have liked LaVine to shoot a little more in this game with how efficient he was being, but he came up with a big moment there to get the Kings up 97-90. But from that point on, the Thunder just took this game over. And that was really disappointing. 97-90, and the Kings offense completely went cold. They didn't score for over 3 minutes, and it felt like a team that didn't know exactly what they were supposed to do in the clutch. It felt like a team that didn't know who the guy was offensively. They were ending this game with the starting lineup, so with Russell Westbrook in there. Against the Lakers last game, the Kings had a little bit of a good thing going offensively late in the game, but it was Keon Ellis instead of Russell Westbrook in the game, and so you had better spacing. With Westbrook in the game, the spacing was just really tough. At one point, they did put Monk in for offense, but that was way too late. And so when the spacing is as bad as it is, you're relying on LaVine to hit some tough shots, DeMar to hit some tough shots, or Westbrook and Sabonis to hit some threes, which they did not late in this one. I also thought Dennis Schroeder just forced up some bad shots. He was forcing up threes all game. He just had a quiet offensive game. Sabonis was not doing much offensively. And so it was down to guys like DeMar and LaVine really just to make some shots, and they went cold down the stretch. Defensively, the Kings really were just blitzing Shea every possession. They had to. That's how they had to guard it. And this was really the worry, where for 3.5 quarters of the game, the Kings were able to hold up defensively, throwing around different looks. But then when it comes down to it, and this is what I'm worried about all season, when it comes down to it, when teams are methodical about how they go about breaking down a defense, that's where they can really pick out the Kings' flaws. And that's what we saw, because once it got down to it, Shea was just able to pick apart the Kings' defense and create open three after open three. It felt like an open three on every single possession. They didn't knock down a whole ton of them, and the Kings still had a shot in this game. But then the offensive rebounding was too much. There were 3 offensive rebounds that I can remember down the stretch. 2 of them were on the same possession, where one of them was off of a missed free throw, which was unfortunate. Sabonis got stripped on one. I mean, it was hard to blame Sabonis for the rebounding. He had a bad game overall, but the rebounding, he was the only guy in there even trying to rebound. Occasionally, Westbrook would get in there, but for the most part, Sabonis was kind of on his own and was 1v2 when he got stripped by Dort on that rebound. So the Thunder were just more clinical down the stretch. They looked like they knew what they were doing. It was Shea with the ball, and they would create from there once they generated an odd man situation behind the play when the Kings were blitzing Shea. The Kings, on the other hand, did not look like they knew what they were doing offensively, and that's ultimately what decided this game. So while it wasn't a bad effort by any means from the Kings, it still ends up being a loss, and the Kings are going to have to pull out some wins against good teams here because they just play a lot of good teams, and this was an opportunity to do it. This was an opportunity where they were up late in the game and they weren't able to close it. And so I am worried about this team down the stretch. That's going to decide a lot about where this team goes, is how this team plays down the stretch. And it feels like the Kings don't even know what lineup they want to play down the stretch. We've seen a lot of the Russell Westbrook lineup that we started in this game. And so is that now the starting lineup until Keegan gets back or until Neek gets back? Maybe, probably. I would say we probably see this lineup again, but I don't know if that can always be the closing lineup, because I think that there's just not enough spacing in that lineup to provide good closing offense to a game. On the defensive end, I do think the Kings found something. Not that they're going to be able to use this same type of 2-3 zone against every team, but I think the Kings looked connected within the zone for the most part. Of course, they gave up some open looks, but the way they were able to scramble around defensively, or certain guys were able to scramble around, especially at the top of the zone, where you could have a guy like Keon at the top of the zone, really able to scramble defensively, and then let a guy like DeMar chill a little bit more. Because DeMar has been awful defensively, and he is just someone who's just going to reach when he's guarding one-on-one and let his guy by. Monk does a little bit of the same, right? And that's why the Kings had so many fouls in the last game, is there was way too much reaching. In this game, that zone kind of limited the amount of one-on-one reaching defense that the Kings were playing, because they were in this zone. And so it was a lot less just one-on-one defense, which is a big weakness for the Kings. But the problem was the late game defense was still very easy to exploit for OKC. And some of that, I do think, is not having Keon in the game in those moments to be able to try to disrupt things. I liked the combination of Keon Ellis and Russell Westbrook because they both are very active defensively and can get a lot of deflections, and they generate offense in that way. I mean, part of what makes Keon a good offensive player is just because he gambles so much defensively, and it creates good looks for himself in transition. And he's able to get those deflections to get himself going in transition. And that can create easy offense for the Kings. And down the stretch, that can be crucial. So that's why I think Keon needs to be in the game down the stretch, both for his defense, also for his spacing. But he did play 27 minutes in this game, was very good guarding Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and was rewarded for that. I think he probably would have played close to that many minutes against the Lakers if he wasn't in foul trouble this game. He was just able to stay out of foul trouble and only had 2 fouls. Was a +5, 12 points, 4 for 10 from the field, 2 for 5 from 3. Had a couple of steals, had a block. So a very good game from Keon. Another trend that we continue to see, though, is in the rebounding department. It's not like the Kings even got like heavily out-rebounded. They actually won the rebounding battle 46-44. OKC had one more offensive rebound at 10, but it was more just what happened late in the game with the Kings not being able to grab defensive rebounds. Sabonis had 18 rebounds, 12 defensive, 6 offensive. He was fighting for his life on both ends of the floor when it came to rebounding. Westbrook had 8 rebounds, but there's just not too much rebounding, or he had 9 rebounds, 8 defensive rebounds. But there's just not enough rebounding outside of that. I mean, I thought early in the game, actually, the Kings were doing a good job of team rebounding. There were moments of Sabonis boxing out Isaiah Hartenstein, and then the guards coming in and grabbing them, but I just don't think the Kings did a good enough job of that when the Thunder were really pressing for those offensive rebounds late in the game. Aaron Wiggins got that huge offensive rebound that he was able to save to Hartenstein inside for the and one. That was a huge moment in this game. Lou Dort stripping that from Sabonis was a huge moment in this game. So those crucial offensive rebounds late in the game It's these moments down the stretch of games where the Kings' size really gets exploited. The rest of the game, you can kind of survive through that zone defense or through junking things up and playing some pretty solid team defense. And that's what the Kings did. And so that's what I think the Kings can build upon from this game. But I just don't know if there's really any fix to what we saw late in the game where OKC is just able to really target, Sabonis in the pick and roll, and then the Kings blitz, and then they play 4-on-3 on the backside. And then a little bit more on the clutch time offense. Again, against the Lakers, the Kings found something with playing a lot of Schroeder, Levine, Sabonis action together. They just weren't able to do that in this game because you have Russell Westbrook in the game. And so if it's Westbrook and DeRozan both sitting in the corners for three, I mean, I know Westbrook was knocking down some threes and actually made a guy jump on a pump fake on the three-point line. But still, that's just not enough gravity in the corners for that action to really work anymore. Looking at some individual performances, I think it was the first bad Malik Monk game of the season, at least on both ends of the court. I think his first game of not hitting a three, but he looked overmatched by some of the defenders, especially when Caruso was on him. But then on the defensive end, he was pretty poor as well. He just couldn't get much going offensively and was turning the ball over. So thought it was his first really bad game of the season. You also look at Sabonis. He's been struggling in all three of the games that he's played this season, I think. And again, you look at his box score, it's 10 points, 18 rebounds, 5 turnovers. He went 5 for 15 from the field. He couldn't make a layup. I don't know what's happened to his touch. Hopefully it comes back. But right now, he can't make a layup. He had some really nice fakes inside and some really nice post moves, some really nice footwork, and then he would just blow the layup, right? So, there's not much you can do about that other than say, hey, maybe just put the ball into the basket. That's my analysis of that. But then he's also been pretty loose with the basketball. He's not the steady pair of hands that I feel like we've been able to count on in past seasons. Is some of that down to his role just being different within the offense now and him not being used to it? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe after a little bit more time, we'll be able to tell a little bit more if this is something to worry about, whether we should be worrying about his fit into this offense. I think there are times where you really see how it can be great. Him and Levine combining in the dribble handoff game, Levine coming off and hitting a three. Sabonis screening for Levine off the ball and Levine hitting a three. Levine coming around and using that three-point gravity to get downhill and find a pocket pass into Sabonis. But then you also see the problems where Levine is throwing the ball at Sabonis's feet 4 straight times in the pick and roll. Levine just isn't that playmaker that a De'Aaron Fox or a Malik Monk has been for Sabonis in the past. And so you want someone out there who's going to be able to give Sabonis a few more easy buckets, although he's probably going to smoke the layup anyways, but you want some easy layups for him. And Dennis Schroeder, he was kind of coming around all these screens and just jacking up threes, and I thought he had probably his first really poor game of the season, especially offensively. I don't think he was good at all. He only had 8 points and 3 assists. Just thought he was settling because in the previous games, he'd been getting to the paint at will and creating from there. But in this game, it was a lot more settling from the three-point line. Getting to more of the good performances, though, Russell Westbrook came into the starting lineup, dropped 16 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, was active defensively, had active hands, was getting deflections, was able to obviously hit the three, was able to get downhill and create for others and get to the rim, finish at the rim. So really good for him to get into the starting lineup and make the most of his opportunity. He's been good so far individually. It's really just about how he fits into the team and how the lineups fit together. And again, that was my biggest problem. I was never critical of the Westbrook signing because I didn't think that he was worth a vet's minimum as a player. Clearly he is, and clearly he is showing that. It's more just how he fits within this team. And there are times where, maybe it's not even him that should come out of the lineup late in games, right? Maybe it's someone else who should come out if he's playing well, whether that be Dennis Schroeder or DeMar DeRozan at times, because Russ has been playing well and his rebounding was very important in this game to help relieve at least some of the pressure off of Sabonis in terms of rebounding. Levine, I talked about a little bit earlier, 4 for 6 from 3, 23 points. So not the 30-point games that we'd come to expect from him early in the season. Finally, he doesn't score 30, but he only took 13 shots. Didn't love that. I mean, this is a tough OKC defense. Felt though the Kings could have looked for him a little bit more at times. And also thought that he was on the ball a little too much. I think OKC did a good job of trying to make him into a passer, into a playmaker. And so he wasn't able to get as many shots as he might like. But I definitely want to see him shooting more than 13 times. DeMar, 19 points, 7 for 14 from the field. Had some great moments, especially when OKC was going on runs to kind of stop the bleeding. Had some very nice playmaking. So thought it was a solid DeMar game. And he doesn't look quite as bad defensively when you just put him at the bottom of a zone. And then I already talked about Keon. Drew Eubanks came in for 13 minutes and had 4 rebounds, didn't shoot the ball, didn't score, had a steal and a block. Actually thought that he had a very solid game, especially in the first half. Was pretty impactful. The second half, maybe not as much, but in the first half, had some good moments, offensive rebounding, tipping balls. Like he tipped a ball to Devin Carter, who then had a putback dunk. He also had some good moments at the rim, protecting the rim. And then speaking of Devin Carter, you have Devin Carter who played 9 minutes, was a +8, 4 points, 2 steals, an assist, knocked down 2 free throws. Those looked good. I was surprised to see Devin Carter. The Kings, the first 3 Kings off the bench were all guards, along with the Kings starting 4 guards. So that was pretty crazy. But I'm happy to see Devin Carter in because he had such a bad moment against the Lakers where he came in, played like 2 minutes, and was awful, you know. So for him to come back in right away and get a little redemption, that must have felt good because he had some good moments, especially in the zone defense where he can be really active as a defender. And he found ways to get a couple of steals lurking around in that zone, coming to the middle of the floor when the other team isn't expecting it, and getting those steals and then pushing the ball in transition the other way. He also was attacking closeouts and making the extra pass on offense. So after a disastrous first couple of minutes of the season for Devin Carter, much better in this game. We'll see if he continues to get minutes going forward. The Kings now have their first back-to-back of the season as they go from OKC to Chicago to play the Bulls tomorrow. The Bulls have been playing some pretty solid basketball to start this season. They've been playing a very team brand of basketball, been one of the deepest scoring teams in the NBA. Josh Giddey's been good. Trey Jones was someone who I was hoping that the Kings could go after in the offseason, but he stayed in Chicago. He's been very good. Kevin Huerter's going to hit a few shots against the Kings. Matas Buzelis has been a great second-year player for them. They just got some depth, like Ayo Dosunmu coming off the bench. And Patrick Williams has been solid to start this season, and I could see Patrick Williams being a guy that has a pretty solid game against the Kings because I see him. He's not the same player as Rui Hachimura, but in terms of size and physicality, has a lot of those similar traits. And with the Kings starting so many guards, I could see that maybe being a problem, that size mismatch. Him, Matas Buzelis, even both Josh Giddey and Kevin Huerter being bigger guards, I think that can pose problems for the Kings. But also no one on the Bulls has lightning quick speed or anything, so the Kings are just going to have to use their speed to stay in front of these guys in the Bulls, keep them out of the paint as much as possible off the dribble. The Kings got to do their work early and stay in front of guys on the perimeter. Anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. I will be back to recap that game tomorrow night against Chicago, so I will see you guys then. Peace.